circulatory system. The circulatory system is kind of like the Uber driver of your body and the bodies of most animals. When you are a single cell, okay, if you're a single-celled organism, for instance, well, you're pretty small, right? You're one cell. There you are. Maybe you have some cilia. You got a little nucleus, and you got some organelles inside. Because you're so small, it doesn't take much for stuff to get around your body. Things inside of you can easily move around. They can basically float right around through the cytoplasm, and they can move around in here relatively easily. It's not very far to go. So if you have some oxygen, right, that has come across your membrane over here, it's squeezed its way right through the membrane molecules. That oxygen can easily find its way over here very quickly. This process is called diffusion, right? And in fact, cells can also create sort of currents in their cytoplasm, in the cytosol, that can push and move things around the cell. So it's not a big deal. You don't need a heart to pump anything because it's not very far. And it's easy for it to get around. But when you start getting bigger, when you blow this creature up into a giant creature that's made up of many cells, here's a giant creature, right? Now, the problem is, now, oxygen that touches the body here, how does it get all the way through there? Like, how does it get around? It's just too much. We can no longer just rely on the easy diffusion of things. So what we need is a mechanism to push things around the body, right? We need a system that, for specialized cells, which form specialized tissues, which form specialized organs, that cooperate in an organ system called the circulatory system to move things around. And that's primarily how the purpose of the circulatory system. So it's a transport system. And just every large organism needs a transport system. Trees have a transport system. Plants have a transport system. It's very different from animal systems because they have evolved along an entirely different path and they've found unique solutions to their problems. They don't have a heart, for instance. They rely on natural processes, pressure differences in gradients and concentrations to move things around in a tree. But they do a pretty good job because there's trees that are hundreds of feet high and they can pull things all the way up from the soil and they can move sugars and things all the way down to the ground. So they don't have a heart, but they have a way of doing it. We, however, along with most animals like us, have a system with a heart and blood vessels. So essentially, those are the two components in an animal system. So let's put larger organisms have systems, organ systems, for transport, because they can't do what the tiny one cell can do. Okay? Larger animals have essentially a heart which acts like a pump to push the blood around. They have the heart, they have blood, of course, which is the sort of the carrier. Blood is the thing, the solution that things can move around in. And then, of course, they have blood vessels. And blood vessels are essentially the channels, or like the roads, right? I'll put roads here. So the blood is the Uber driver. The heart is the engine in the car that moves it, and the blood vessels are the roads in which they follow, right? The roads, or we could put the blood vessels, roads, pathways, channels, something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about each of these things in its turn. And we're going to begin with the heart. It seems like the logical place to start. Now, there's going to be some words we're going to use. So I will just kind of give you a brief introduction to that. When we get down to studying blood vessels, we'll basically see that there are two major sort of words that we use to describe blood vessels, and those are arteries and veins. Okay? And so I'll describe that later, but we are going to look at the heart, and the heart, of course, is connected to arteries and veins, and we're going to see what those words actually mean. Okay, so we're going to start by going through the process of drawing a picture to help us sort of, get all the parts of our brain working on this. So remember, when we draw pictures, it's not because we want a picture. The internet has great pictures. We want to go through the process and learn as we go. All right? There's another thing about the heart, because the heart is pumping blood through the body. The blood does many things. It brings nutrients around the body, but it also brings oxygen. And so by tradition, in biology, we use two different colors when we're talking about circulation. We use red and blue. And red signifies blood vessels or parts of the heart where the blood has already been to the lungs and is basically full of oxygen, oxygenated blood. And we're going to use blue for blood that is in a blood vessel or part of the heart that has not had oxygen. The oxygen has been sort of sucked out by the body. So I'm just going to write that here. Red is going to stand for oxygenated. All right? Because it helps us to see the whole picture. And blue is going to stand for deoxygenated. Right? So blood that's been through the lungs is red and oxygenated, and blood that has sort of already been to the lungs, but then it's also been sent all around the body and delivered its oxygen. Now it's full of carbon dioxide, and it has to go back to the lungs and get recharged, right? So we're going to see how that works. Okay. Now, when you draw this, I'm going to draw this picture, but it's a complicated picture, so don't draw right on my heels. Stay a step or two behind me, and I'll pause now and then to catch up, because I might draw something and say, oh, wait, and erase it, and you'll all be mad because you have to white out your picture. So just be patient. Let's do this in the style of Bob Ross, nice and slow and relaxed, no rush. If you want a title, you can title it The Heart. Makes sense, right? Okay, so I'm going to try to draw this picture. We're going to draw it. I'm going to start with the blue color. Okay? So at the top of the heart, you'll need at least a half a page to do this, by the way. It's a pretty big picture. So at the top of the heart, I'm going to bring my blue line down, make a little bulge, and slide all the way down like this to about here. There's my first picture, or my first thing. Then I'm going to stop that with the blue, and I'm going to start to use the red because this changes here. And I'm just going to swing up like this to about there and stop right there. Okay, so nice and wide because there's lots of stuff to put in the middle here. All right. Then I'll go back to my blue, and I'm going to draw this sort of branched little vein like that. We're going to color this later. We'll shade it later so we can sort of see. And then I'll swing this down like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a cutaway. We're going to take slices off of the front of the heart so we can see inside. So I'm going to slice this little vein. So you see that's like a vein that's sort of going up somewhere. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw sort of an inside. Like this, an inside that goes down here, all the way down here, and then loops back up like this. But this time, it's going to shoot right up like this, and it's going to go way over here across to there. Okay, something like that. Then I'm going to do a little V. I'm going to take from here and go down like this to about here, and then up here like this to about there. Okay, I'm going to pause for a minute so you can catch up. All right, I've changed to my red color now, that you've caught up to me, and I'm going to sort of draw kind of a thing here, and then a big cavernous sort of area down through here like this. And then it's just kind of going to go like that. Actually, I'm going to fix that just a little. It won't let me erase. Okay. I'm going to fix my blue here. I'm going to fix the way that went. I want it to sort of go more like that. Okay. Now, what's going to happen up here is this little thing is sort of going underneath this little blue part, and under here we're going to continue up like this and snug up like this to here and go around like that. So you can kind of see how that red region is sort of under that blue part that's arching out at front. And then we're going to make a little loop here. Okay. So right about here, I'm going to make a little loop, and this is going to go like this. This is going to have little branches that go up like this. And then it's going to suddenly go back down, so I'll draw the rest of it later. Okay? Something like that. Now, going back to the blue part, right in the middle of the heart, it comes up here, and then it's going to sort of branch. It's going to do something like this. So you can see how it kind of goes to the right and to the left. It sort of goes in a little tunnel underneath that back part of the heart. And now I can finish my red and join it like that. And maybe finish my little loop like that. So looks something like that. Okay. All right. So far, so good. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do some shading to give this some perspective. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little crayon here, and it's blue. And I'm just going to sort of shade this a little bit. A little darker, and then lighter like that, and darker like that. So it starts to look like it's more of a 3D. Shade all this in. Okay, and here I'm going to shade sort of all over there like that. I'm going to shade the I'm going to color this part in. I've actually changed my mind here. I want to make this part a little more defined. Yeah, something like that. So back to my crayon. So I'm shading along here like this. And I'm just kind of coloring in this section. And then up here, I'll shade this guy a little bit too. something like that. So it starts to look like 3D, you know, like these are tubes, and these are major blood vessels, something like that. And then I'll go to my red crayon and I'll do sort of the same thing. I'm going to color in this part under here, all in nice red. This is a wall of thick muscle. This is all muscle. I colored in the red and the blue, both are all muscle, but remember, we're talking about the color coding for where the oxygenated blood is. And then I'm going to shade up here a little bit to make this look sort of like 3D, like a blood vessel. Just shade a little bit, shade, something like that. All right, it's starting to look more like actually something that looks like a heart. Okay. Now, what I'm going to also do is I'm going to shade this part relatively dark because we want to show that that's going way down behind. It looks like it goes under the blue and goes into here, but it doesn't. It goes right behind the heart. So that we don't really want to look at that as turning back on itself. It's sort of in the distance, way behind. So that's why I've decided to shade that right here sort of darker to make it look like it's going way into the back of the heart, behind, away from us. Okay. We can also take our blue here and maybe just a little bit right there as well. Okay, back to the pen now. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a circle right there to kind of show that that's sort of going into the tube. So we've cut that tube away, you see. And I'll put the same thing right here, a little sort of loop or a little circle. Okay, so far, so good. Okay, now, you see this guy in the center, this blue. He goes over to the right and he begins to branch off. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of show him branching like that. But he also goes the other way. In fact, if I get my crayon again and I shade it in here pretty dark, it looks like he pokes underneath the red. And he does. So he's going to poke all the way underneath until he gets to the other side where he's going to squeeze out like this. And he's going to branch off. Kind of that. So this is really a continuing of that little guy in the middle who's gone in behind the red and the blue. So again, we'll have to give him some shading to make it look like that. So we'll shade this in very dark to show that it's sort of in behind. Okay, and then just a light shade over here for in behind. Okay, good. So you can see how it tucks in around the back. All right, we're almost there. Now, we have to draw a few other little fellas. First of all, let's go back to our pen, and we're going to take a different color. We're going to take a green color, or any other color that's not red or blue. And we're going to draw some very special structures, which are called valves. And these, of course, are special flaps that regulate the flow of the blood. So there's a valve right about here. So I'm just going to draw these little green flaps like this. And they kind of angle a little bit downwards. And then over here, right about here, there's another little flap that sort of angles down like this. Okay. There's also a valve inside here. So I'm going to draw this dotted because this valve is inside that tube, but it's the same idea. And there's also another valve inside this tube. Whoops, let me just erase that. I want that to be sort of a dotted to show that those valves are inside those tubes. Okay, now I'm going back to red. And in red, I'm going to show another little sort of forked set of arteries. Wait, let me draw that again. That's not very good. So this little guy is going to come in like this, and he's going to sort of branch like that. And he tucks in behind, and I'm going to put a hole here because he opens up right in there. And there's two of them. There's another one that sort of goes this way. He branches off, and he opens up right in there. And then over on this side, it's getting kind of small, but there's another one. Maybe I won't draw the branches. I'll just draw them like this. There's one. Oh, that's a little too high. Wait. Maybe down about here, I think it makes more sense. Maybe I can draw the little branches if I do it like this. And then there's another one sort of here as well. And they go into here and open up right in there. So to make those look good, we'll do some shading on those as well. And okay, maybe shade in the little holes so they look like they're dark and like tunnels. Oh, wait a minute, my mistake. Oh, shoot. I told you not to go. They don't open in here. I'm in the wrong spot. They go all the way under the heart. Rats, sorry about that. Told you not to stay too close to me. They go all the way under the heart and they open up over here. They open into this area. They squeeze into there. Yeah, so you got to get rid of, they got to all be in there. Okay. Good. Oof, we averted a small crisis there. Okay, now I'll get my pen again. Maybe I'll pause a minute and let you catch up. So back to the blue, we also want to draw sort of a big blood vessel that comes up like this from the bottom of the heart. And he goes in behind and he opens up in here. That's where that bottom guy opens. So again, we'll get ourselves a little shading here. We'll shade him. He's a fairly big blood vessel too, but he goes behind the other one. So I'll darken this up so it looks like it's in behind there. See? Art class 101 there. So it goes behind and it opens up in here. Okay. The only other thing now, I think, is just to kind of clean a few things up. So I'm just going to take this line and extend it like that. And these little red lines, I'm going to extend them up like this so they look like they've gone behind that other one. And I think we're pretty much ready to start writing down labels. Okay. All right, we'll just do a quick shade in blue along here, and then in red. And again, these go in behind, so I'll shade them a little darker. Okay. Now, the heart is a giant cycle. So there's really no start or finishing spot. It doesn't matter where you start, you're going to end up back in that spot because the blood flows in like a cycle. It goes all around and comes back where it started and goes again. But what's important is you'll notice from the two colors, there's two basic sides to the heart. There's the right side and there's the left side. Now, when we say right and left in biology, we don't mean your right and left. The red side is not on the right. What we have to imagine is a person standing here facing you, and this heart is sitting in their body. So this is their right side. I'm waving my right hand. Okay, those of you watching on the video, if you're watching, can't see, but this would be the right-hand side of my body if I was facing you, right? So we always label biology from the perspective of the person or the patient, right? The perspective of the organism, not your right. So it's backwards. So there, where I put this little X, that is the right side of the heart. And over here on this side, this would be called the left side of the heart. Okay? Now we're gonna write right and left on everything we label to remind us of that. That's important. Okay. Now, let's erase those. The other thing we have to remember when talking about the way blood flows is this. Blood is either flowing in it's one of two directions. It's either on its way towards the heart or it's on its way away from the heart. And so anything where blood is going out of the heart is called an artery. Now, some people like to say, well, arteries have the oxygenated blood and they're red, and veins are the ones that are coming back to the heart. Well, that's true for most of the arteries and veins, but it's not true for all of them. And so you can't really use that definition very well. You have to remember that this very simple thing. Veins lead away from the heart, blood flows away. Sorry, veins lead towards the heart, arteries lead the blood away. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick a starting point. Let me pick a color here. I want to use the yellow, but it doesn't show up very good. So let me pick something a little more, something that'll stand out. Maybe this bright purple will be perfect. Let's pick this. Okay. All right. Pen. And what I'll do is I will pick a wider line. Maybe this one. Let's try that. All right, so here's what happens. The blood, we're going to start here just arbitrarily. And what happens is the blood flows, it gets pushed up this way. Okay? And it goes up into this very large blood vessel right here. And in this large blood vessel, it goes around there. This large blood vessel is called the aorta. And it's bringing fresh, oxygenated blood. It's red, right? Fresh, oxygenated blood. Actually, I'm not erasing those. I'm just going to use, they're too thick, and they're going to get a little bit out of hand. So let me just make that a little thinner. Yeah, let's start here and go like this. That's better. Through those, see how I went through the little green flaps there? If you try to go backwards against those two flaps, they would sort of flop down. They'd be pushed downwards and lock, and they would prevent blood from going backwards. So we'll talk about how they work a little bit later. Now also, the blood can also squirt upwards in these little three guys up here. So this is the fresh blood. It's ready to go. The body's waiting for it, full of oxygen. And it's pumped upwards. The three little uppy arteries are taking blood up to the head and branching out to the arms and the upper part of the body. The other part, sort of right here, in fact, it continues right down. I should put the arrow here. It winds down behind the heart, and it brings blood all the way to the rest of the body, everywhere else. So we don't see that blood vessel anymore. He disappears behind the heart. And that, of course, is the aorta. It's the largest artery. And it has many branches right off the start as the blood spreads out from places in the body. So now it goes through the aorta, and it goes down through, and it branches into your intestines, into your liver, into all your organs, and out to your skin, and down into your muscles and your legs. And of course, those cells are using up all the oxygen. And they're putting carbon dioxide into the blood. And now it has to come back to the heart. From all those places, it starts to find blood vessels, works its way back. But it's blue now because it's given up all its oxygen to the body. And it comes back in two important places. It comes back from the bottom of the body this way, and from the top of the body, it comes in here and down here like this and out this little hole into this big cavity. So these are the coming back from the body. So these are veins. They're leading back to the heart. And they are bringing back the blood, and that's why they're blue, because it's already been to where it's delivery, right? It's the empty Uber coming back. Actually, it's not empty, is it? It's bringing carbon dioxide back. Now, once it comes out into this region here, so you see this little arrow at the bottom that I drew here. I'll just highlight him here. He goes up and he pops out right here, right? That guy at the bottom pops out into this region as well. This is a meeting place. It's a little chamber of the heart, or a room. A word for room is an atrium. You might, if you know anything about architecture, or sometimes they design a big fancy building and it'll have like a big space in the middle. They call it an atrium, right? It's like a foyer or a big sort of entryway, but it's just a fancy word for a big room. Then the blood follows these two guys and it squeezes through here. Again, it goes right between those two little valves. And you can see what would happen if it tried to go backwards. Those little valves would push upwards and slam shut. Then it slides its way right up through here. And it goes into this tube, right through here, and out again. And it goes this way, and it goes over here, like this. It goes through these guys, and it's on its way to the lungs. That's where it's going from both of these. To lungs. That says lungs on both sides. This one doesn't look very good. Let me just get a smaller. I'll write it over here. To lungs. And it's on its way to its lungs because it's blue. It has no oxygen. So it goes to the lungs. Then, whoops, I lost my lungs over here. Then when it's filling up with oxygen at the lungs and getting all that carbon dioxide out of it, it's now red again because it's full of oxygen. So it's coming back from the lungs here and here and here and here. This is from lungs. From the lungs. Right? And it goes into here and it comes out this little hole and it comes through here and out this little hole. On this side, it's also coming back from the lungs, through here, so from lungs again. And it squeezes all the way under the heart and pops out over here. Squeezes there, all the way under the heart and pops out here. And then, of course, once it's there, it makes its way back through here, and look, we're right back where we started again. And that's the way the blood is flowing through the heart. So it goes, again, if we follow our arrows, and we start right here, we go up through the aorta, which sends the oxygenated blood all the way to the body. And then it comes back here and here through the vena cava. It goes into this little area, and then it goes down to this area, and then up through this big blue blood vessel to the lungs, and then back from the lungs into this area, and so on, and just keeps on swirling through. So basically, if you think about it, there's two pumps here working together. The blue side of the heart is actually pushing blood to the lungs. If you follow that arrow from the blue, it's pushing blood to the lungs, right? And then when it comes back from the lungs, it sloshes into the big red area, which then pushes blood up through that red aorta to the body, right? I don't have enough room here, but these arrows that I drew up here, if you wanted to write to body here or something, that's where that's going. It's moving towards the body. I won't complicate our picture. Okay. So that's the blood flow. Now we have to label the parts of this picture. So to do that, it's going to be a little tricky with room. So what I'll do maybe is use a black, and I'll use a smaller, and so we don't want to confuse it with our directional arrows. Okay, so let's start with the blood vessels that we've labeled. Let's start right here. This blue guy, these are called the pulmonary arteries, because they are leading away from the heart. They're going to the lungs. So that's what these guys are. Now these ones happen to be on the left side of the heart. So we call them the left pulmonary arteries. Makes sense, right? Remember, this is the heart's left, not your left. Coming back from the lungs, we call these guys right here the left pulmonary veins. So remember, veins come back to the heart and arteries go away from the heart. The word pulmonary just means lungs. Pulmonary means lungs. So veins are coming back from the lungs and the pulmonary arteries that go to the lungs. And these are on the left side of the heart. And we have two big rooms on this side. We've got this big room right here. That's called the left atrium. The left atrium. Okay? Now, I'm going to draw a line to our little green guy, but I'm going to leave him for a minute. We'll label him later. I'll put his little label thereafter. Then we have this big space down here at the bottom right here. This is called the left ventricle. The left ventricle is the part of the heart that squeezes blood up through that aorta up to the rest of the body. It's the thickest and strongest muscle of the heart. That's why I drew the outside of it a little thicker, right? You see at the bottom there and around the sides. This is very muscular because it's a very strong contraction because it's got to push blood all the way to all the parts of your body, from your head to your tips of your toes. Okay, so far so good. Let's move to the other side of the heart. You're going to see a lot of the same words, except they're on the right side. Now, this can be tricky because I didn't really leave a lot of space over there for me to write things. So what I'll do is I'll use a little R dot, which stands for right, okay? So over here, we have the right pulmonary arteries. Right here. Just like on the other side, they were called the left pulmonary arteries. Now they're called the right pulmonary arteries, all right? And they, of course, are going off to the lungs as well. Everything's kind of doubled up because, of course, you have two lungs, correct? So you have the right and the left lung. So you have the arteries that feed them. And down below, just like on the other side, we have the right pulmonary veins, which are bringing the blood back to the heart. And all of these veins, they exit over in the left atrium. They all squeeze out, and those four little holes over there on the left atrium, that's where they empty in. And then, of course, we have this space up here, which is called the right atrium. Unfortunately, we're really squeezing things in here, but that's the right atrium. It's a mirror of the other side. Left atrium on top, right atrium on the bottom. Then we'll leave a little arrow for our little green valve, which we'll label in a minute. And then we will label this bottom area. That's called the, you can probably guess, if that one was the left ventricle, this one is the right ventricle. This is also a major pumping muscle, but it pumps blood, if you follow the arrow, to the lungs. So the blue side of the heart, the right side, is pumping blood to the lungs. Then it comes back and gathers on the left side and gets pumped to the body. Then it gathers on the right side and gets pumped to the lungs. Then it gathers on the left side and gets pumped to the body. Then it gathers on the, and so on. It just keeps on going. So there's one sort of side of the heart that's moving blood to the lungs, and then it comes back, and then the red side, so the right side of the heart is the lung pump. The right ventricle. And the left ventricle, the left side of the heart, is the body pump. Now, you see the big blue veins that are emptying into the right atrium. Okay? One empties right here, and one empties sort of right there. Those have fancy names. So I'm gonna write them down here. This one, because he's down below, it's called the inferior. In the language of English, we think inferior means not as good, right? Superior is better and inferior is bad. The truth is, in biology, inferior means below. So this is the lower one. So inferior, whoops, gotta spell that right. Inferior vena cava, which is Latin for basically big vein. Vena cava. So it's a vein, but it has a special name. And of course, right up at the top, there's the one that's coming back from the rest of the body up above. So it's called the superior. Got it? Inferior. Up here, this one, if I just erase my words here, get this out of the way, I can label a few more things up here. So this would be the superior vena cava. Right here. So you can see they both empty into the right atrium. I'm going to go down here to show you this inferior one, right? He goes in this way, comes in here, and he pops out up here where that little opening is. That's where he opens. So I'll just erase those for now. So they both empty into the same spot. Both of these vena cava, they empty into the right atrium. Okay, only a few more things. Actually, maybe only one more thing. And that would be this great big red guy at the top here. And that, of course, is the aorta. The aorta, which is the major blood vessel leading from the heart to the rest of the body. And there's three little veins that pop out. Well, they're not the veins, they're arteries, and there's three of them, but they branch and they go to the head, right? So you've heard of your carotid artery that goes up through your neck, right? So one of those would be the carotid artery. There's brachial arteries. Brachial means arms. They branch out to your arms and supply blood to this top part of your body, when the rest just turns right or upside down, goes down behind the heart, and gives the blood to the rest of the body. There's also 4 very small arteries right off the aorta, and they branch off. I'm not going to draw them. And they actually turn right around and they go right into the heart muscle. Amazingly, even though the heart is full of blood, it cannot use that blood for its own cells. The blood is moving through the heart, but in order for the blood cells or for the heart cells themselves to get their oxygen, they need their own little set of arteries. These are called the coronary arteries, and they come off of the aorta, and they just loop right around, and they sort of branch off, and they go all over the heart and feed the heart with the blood that it needs as well, which is interesting. These are the arteries. They're quite small, but they're very important because they feed the heart its own blood. right? And these are the ones, if you get that the disease where you get plaques from cholesterol depositing in your bloodstream on your blood vessels, these can get blocked. And if they get blocked, it's very serious because that's the blood supply for your heart. Your heart can't use the blood flowing through it. It can only use the blood from these coronary arteries. If they get blocked, your heart will stop. You'll have a heart attack. And this happens to a lot of people who reach middle age and beyond. If they haven't taken good care of themselves, those become blocked, those coronary arteries. And then they have to go to the doctor. If they're lucky, they might have a heart attack, but they get medical attention. And the doctor will go inside with a long little sort of cable that they go up through the leg, right? And they would go in through your leg and they would wind it all the way up to the aorta inside, and they would try to scrape out the plaque and free up those arteries and make them clean again. If they can't do that, if they're too blocked, they might have to go in with surgery and cut them out and put in artificial artery paths, which they call bypassing the artery. So if you get a bypass surgery, that means you're bypassing these blocked arteries. And you can, if one is blocked, it's a single bypass, right? If two are blocked, it's a double bypass. And if three are blocked, you have to bypass three, triple. If all four are blocked, you get a quadruple bypass. And that's usually a very serious thing. Because the next step after that is dying, right? Is death. So your heart has to be healthy. And those coronary arteries, which are not on our picture, but they branch off of the aorta right near the top, they have to be kept clean. And the way you keep them clean is exercise and proper diet. It's really the only way. Otherwise, when you get to be a bit older, you may end up with some issues. Okay, so we've labeled all the heart. There's a few other things we could draw. We have to label our little valves. I also want to put a little label here. It's not critical, but there's this big divider muscle in between the right and left side. That's called the septum. Septum. Okay, so now that you're caught up, the valves. Let's just talk about the valves. There's actually 4 of them, but our picture's getting so hard to label. We'll label the 2 important ones that I drew in green inside the heart. And these valves, in reality, as you saw from the heart, they really look like all kind of sinewy, kind of fibrous material. But effectively what happens is they sit like this, sort of on an angle like that. And you can imagine if you tried to push blood against them the other way, where it's not supposed to go, they would get pushed up and they would seal off and close. Okay, so over here on the right side of the heart, the blue side between the 2 atria, we have what's called the tricuspid valve. It's got 3 little flaps to it. So let's put over here a tricuspid valve. Okay, and of course there's no way I can fit that in there, so I'm going to just erase my right ventricle here for a second and squeeze in tricuspid valve right here. Tricuspid valve. And then I can put this back here. That was the right ventricle. So the tricuspid valve, when that right ventricle squeezes and it contracts, you can see that if not for the valve, the blood might go up here through the pulmonary artery, but it might also go back this way, the way it shouldn't go. So the valve is a way to shut off this little connection between the right atrium and the right ventricle, so that when this ventricle contracts, the green valve slams shut and all the blood is forced to go this way up through the pulmonary artery on its way to the lungs. So that's the purpose of those valves, the tricuspid valve. And then over here we have the mitral valve. It's mitral. Or is it IL? No, I'm right. Sometimes I have these weird moments where I forget things, but it's mitral valve. And that's the same thing. You can imagine if this left ventricle were to squeeze very, very strongly, it wants to push the blood this way up towards the aorta. But if those valves weren't there, it would also push blood backwards up this way, and we don't want that. The blood has to come in that way. It's a one-way only street. So those valves slam shut. And in fact, these ventricles contract so strongly, but the valves, they don't just close gently. They slam shut very, very hard. And in fact, when you listen to someone's heart and you hear it going bum, 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 those sounds you're hearing is the sound of the valve slamming shut, boom, and then the other one. And so what happens is the heart pumps sort of like both ventricles slightly off from each other, right? You hear the sound of a heart, it goes dum dum, dum dum. And it's the second one that's really strong, right? It's not dum dum. It goes dum dum, dum dum. So the first little bump is the right side of the heart contracting to shoot blood to the lungs. And that's the slamming of the tricuspid valve. Thump. And then the second one is a louder, stronger thump, 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 because that's the left ventricle contracting and shooting blood up the aorta, and it's the slamming shut of the mitral valve to keep the blood going where it's supposed to go. And that's the one that's going all the way to your body. The left ventricle is that very powerful pump, which is why it's louder. It slams even harder. The mitral valve is made of two flaps. I guess because it's a little bit stronger that way. It has to withstand a lot more pressure than the tricuspid valve. Okay? And so the slamming shut of those valves every time the heart contracts. So when it goes thump thump, it's the right side very first contracts, and then the left side thump thump, thump thump. And it makes that noise because it slams those valves shut as the blood flows through. And that's the heart. So we're going to stop, take a little break,